Lieutenant James Hawthorne stood at attention in General Marcus Walsh's office aboard the diplomatic security station, trying to hide his surprise at the assignment he'd just received. The general's weathered face bore an expression that mixed amusement with sympathy as he outlined the unusual mission. "The Celestial Empire specifically requested you, Lieutenant. Queen Nalara was quite impressed by your record in diplomatic security. You'll be joining her personal guard detail effective immediately." James maintained his professional composure, though his mind raced with questions. The Celestial Empire was humanity's most powerful alien ally, and their queen was notorious for her eccentricities. "Sir, may I ask why they're requesting human security personnel?" "Surely their own guards are perfectly capable," Walsh finished. "But the Queen insists on having at least one human guard in her detail at all times. Something about cultural exchange." The general's slight smirk suggested there was more to the story. The rest of the briefing passed in a blur of security protocols and diplomatic procedures. As James left the office, his second-in-command, Lieutenant Riya Patel, fell into step beside him. "Heard you got the Queen's detail," she said, failing to hide her grin. "Should I start planning your funeral now or wait until she breaks you like the others?" James shot her a questioning look. "What do you mean, breaks?" Riya's grin widened. "Let's just say the Queen has a reputation. Last 3 human guards requested transfers within a week. Something about unconventional requests and maintaining professional boundaries." Before James could press for details, his comm chimed with his transport schedule. In 6 hours, he'd be aboard the Celestial Empire's flagship, beginning his new assignment. Something told him this would be unlike any security detail he'd handled before. The royal chambers aboard the Celestial Empire's flagship defied human architecture. Crystalline walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns, and gravity seemed to shift subtly as James followed his guide, a tall, silvery-skinned attendant named Vex. "Her Majesty will see you now," Vex announced, gesturing to an archway that seemed to form itself from liquid metal. "She has specific expectations of her guards." "I trust you've been briefed?" "Only that I'm to ensure her safety and follow protocol," James replied carefully. Vex's iridescent eyes sparkled with what might have been amusement. "Of course. Well, good luck, Lieutenant. You'll need it." The chamber beyond was a marvel of alien engineering. The ceiling seemed to show a real-time view of space outside, stars streaming past as the ship traveled at FTL speeds. And there, reclining on what appeared to be a living throne of crystalline branches, was Queen Nalara. James had seen images of the Celestial Queen before, but they didn't do her justice. Her skin was like polished opal, shifting colors in the starlight. Her eyes were pools of swirling silver, and when she moved, it was with an inhuman grace that reminded him she was far from human despite her humanoid appearance. "Lieutenant Hawthorne," she purred, her voice carrying harmonic undertones that made his spine tingle. "I've heard impressive things about you. Tell me, are you as adaptable as your record suggests?" James maintained his professional stance. "I pride myself on handling any situation, Your Majesty." "Any situation?" Her silver eyes sparkled. "We shall see. My previous guards found themselves challenged by my requests. I'm here to ensure your safety, Your Majesty. Whatever that requires." The Queen rose from her throne, moving with liquid grace. "Excellent. Then you won't mind helping me with a rather persistent problem." She turned, revealing her bare back, marked with swirling patterns that seemed to move beneath her opal skin. "These markings require regular maintenance. Would you be so kind as to assist?" James felt his training kick in, keeping his expression neutral despite his surprise. So this was the game. "Your Majesty, perhaps one of your attendants are not available," she finished smoothly. "And this is rather urgent. Unless you're refusing a direct request from the Queen you're sworn to serve." The challenge in her voice was clear. This was a test, but of what? His professionalism? His resolve? Or something else entirely? Of course not, Your Majesty, he replied carefully. However, I should note that my primary duty is your security. Anything that distracts from that. Is your attention so easily divided, Lieutenant? She moved closer, her scent like stardust and morning dew. Surely a man of your capabilities can manage both? James held his ground, meeting her silvery gaze. Your Majesty seems to have given this considerable thought. Her laugh was like crystal wind chimes. Oh, you are interesting. Most guards are stammering or fleeing by now. She circled him slowly, her presence making his skin prickle with awareness. Tell me, Lieutenant, what do you make of my little tests? I think, he said carefully, that a queen who tests her guards so thoroughly must have a reason beyond mere amusement. Something flickered in her silver eyes, approval? Interest? Clever and observant. Perhaps you'll last longer than the others. She gestured to a shimming panel on the wall. There's a security alert you should investigate. We'll continue our discussion later. As James moved to check the panel, he could feel her eyes on him. Whatever game the Queen was playing, he had a feeling he'd just passed the first round. But to what end? The alert turned out to be routine, but as he resumed his post, James couldn't shake the feeling that his assignment to Queen Nalara's guard detail was far from random. The question was, what was she really looking for in her human guards? 3 weeks into his assignment, James was beginning to understand why his predecessors had requested transfers. Queen Nalara's tests had grown increasingly elaborate, each one pushing the boundaries of professional protocol while never quite crossing them. Tonight, she'd summoned him to her private gardens, a breathtaking chamber where alien flora grew in zero gravity, creating a three-dimensional maze of bioluminescent blooms and crystalline vines. The Queen floated among them like a spirit, her opal skin reflecting the plant's ethereal glow. Tell me, Lieutenant, she called, her voice echoing through the floating garden, have you figured it out yet? James maintained his position by the entrance, though his eyes tracked her movement carefully. Figured what out, Your Majesty? Why I keep testing my guards. She plucked a floating flower, its petals shifting colors at her touch. Why I specifically request human guards, only to drive them away. I have theories, he admitted. She drifted closer, the flower still shifting colors in her hand. Share them. You're looking for something specific, he said, meeting her silver eyes. Something you can only find in human guards. The tests aren't about making us uncomfortable, they're about seeing how we react under pressure. Her smile was like starlight. Go on. The requests are increasingly intimate, but never inappropriate for a queen to ask of her guard. You're testing our ability to maintain boundaries while still following orders. To think independently while remaining loyal. Very good, she purred. And why would I need such qualities in a guard? Before James could answer, his enhanced senses picked up a subtle shift in the garden's atmosphere. Without thinking, he launched himself forward, using the zero gravity to his advantage. His body collided with Nalara's just as a crystalline vine whipped through the space where she'd been floating. They tumbled together through the garden, James maneuvering them behind a thick cluster of luminous plants. Stay down, he whispered, his body shielding hers as more vines began to move with obvious hostile intent. Well, Nalara breathed, her face inches from his, it seems you've discovered another reason for my tests. Your garden's been sabotaged, James said, scanning their surroundings while keeping her protected. The environmental controls are compromised. Yes, she agreed calmly, though he felt her hand grip his shoulder. Someone has been trying to kill me for the past 3 months. Hence my need for guards who can think independently while remaining loyal. James processed this revelation even as he calculated escape routes. The hostile vines were blocking the main exit, moving with an intelligence that suggested sophisticated programming. "Why didn't you simply tell me?" "Because, Lieutenant," she said, her silver eyes intense, "I needed to know if I could trust you before I revealed the threat. My own people are suspects. Why do you think I specifically request human guards?" A vine snapped toward them. James rolled them behind another cluster of plants, hyper-aware of the Queen's body pressed against his. "You need an outsider. Someone with no connections to your court's politics. Someone who can resist not just physical temptation, but the temptation of power," she added. Previous guards proved susceptible to bribes from certain factions. The pieces clicked into place. Her tests weren't just about maintaining professional boundaries, they were about proving he couldn't be swayed by seduction or promises of power. "Your Majesty is quite thorough in her screening process." Her laugh was surprisingly genuine despite their dangerous situation. "And you, Lieutenant, are the first to pass all my tests. Now, shall we discuss how to catch my would-be assassins while avoiding these rather aggressive plants?" James spotted a maintenance panel near the garden's secondary exit. "I have an idea, but you'll need to trust me as much as I trust you." "Oh?" Her smile held equal parts challenge and intrigue. "And do you trust me, Lieutenant?" "I trust that everything you've done has had a purpose," he replied, already calculating the risks of his plan. "Including assigning me to your detail." "Smart man," she murmured. Then her expression turned serious. "There's a faction in my court that believes humanity's influence in the Celestial Empire has grown too strong. They want to sever our alliance, even if it means eliminating me to do it." "And you think they've infiltrated your security?" "I know they have. The question is how deep the conspiracy goes." Her eyes searched his. "Are you prepared to help me find out? It would mean placing yourself in considerable danger." James allowed himself a small smile. "Your Majesty, I believe I've been in considerable danger since the moment I accepted this assignment." Her answering smile was radiant. "In that case, Lieutenant, let's give my would-be assassin something to truly worry about." The assassination attempt in the garden had changed everything. As James stood watch in Queen Nalara's private strategy room, he observed the subtle shifts in court dynamics with new eyes. The chamber was secured with both human and celestial technology, making it one of the few places they could speak freely. "Another counselor has voiced concerns about my excessive trust in human security," Nalara reported, studying a holographic display of recent court activities. Her opal skin reflected the shifting data streams. "Counselor Venn this time. He was quite insistent that I rely more on traditional protection." "Venn," James mused, reviewing mental files. "He oversees trade relations with the outer colonies. Recently opposed the new Human-Celestial Commerce Treaty." "Very good." Nalara's silver eyes sparkled with approval. "You've been studying our politics." "Know your environment," James quoted. "First rule of protection detail." "And what else has your study revealed?" James moved closer to the holographic display, careful to maintain professional distance despite their growing familiarity. 3 counselors have opposed strengthening ties with humanity. All 3 have recently acquired unexplained wealth. And all 3 were conspicuously absent during the garden incident. Clever man. Nalara waved her hand, bringing up new data streams. "But there's more. Watch this." The display showed a series of seemingly routine diplomatic exchanges. James frowned, noting patterns. "These communications, they're using standard diplomatic channels, but the encryption is odd." "Because it's masking secondary transmissions," Nalara confirmed. "My own security chief discovered it. Unfortunately, he died in an accident before he could tell me more." James felt his jaw tighten. "When?" 2 days before I requested you for my detail." Her silver eyes met his. "I needed someone outside the system. Someone who could see patterns others might miss. Because I'm human? Because you're you. She moved closer, her scent making his pulse quicken despite his training. Your record showed an unusual combination of skills. Combat expertise, yes, but also pattern recognition, diplomatic training, and... Her lips curved, remarkable self-control. The tests, he realized. They weren't just about loyalty. You were checking if I could notice details while under pressure. Her laugh held genuine warmth. And you performed admirably. Though I must admit, some of those tests were purely for my own amusement. Before James could respond, the holographic display flickered. New data streams appeared, showing emergency protocols activating throughout the ship. We're dropping out of FTL, James said, already moving. Unauthorized protocol override. Nilara's expression turned grave. They're making their move sooner than expected. The ship will be vulnerable during the transition. We need to get you to a secure location. No. Her voice held steel. This is an opportunity. They think they've caught us off guard, but we can use this. James read her intent in her eyes. It's risky. Everything worth doing is. She stepped closer, dropping formal pretense. I trust you, James. Do you trust me? The use of his first name shouldn't have affected him so strongly. Tell me the plan. They'll expect me to head for the secure bunker. Instead, we're going to my private observatory. I can access all ship systems from there, and they won't expect it. Because it's considered a leisure space, James nodded. Not defensible by normal standards. But you're not a normal guard. Her smile held fierce confidence. And I'm not a normal queen. The ship shuddered as it dropped from FTL. Emergency lights pulsed, casting everything in alternating shadow and harsh illumination. James drew his weapon, a hybrid of human and celestial technology, designed specifically for shipboard defense. Stay close to me, he instructed, receiving a raised eyebrow in response. Always so professional, she teased, though her own stance showed combat readiness. Even now. Especially now. He checked the corridor. Ready? Instead of answering, she pressed something into his hand. A small crystal, pulsing with internal light. A key to all secure systems, she explained. In case we're separated. And James? Her hand lingered on his. Try not to die. I've invested far too much time in training you. Despite the gravity of their situation, James felt his lips twitch. Wouldn't want to waste all those tests. They moved through the dimmed corridors like shadows, James's combat instincts working in perfect sync with Nilara's knowledge of her ship. Twice they avoided security patrols that were suspiciously out of position. Once they had to take a maintenance shaft to avoid a group of armed conspirators. In the close confines of the shaft, Nilara's body pressed against his back as they climbed. Her breathing was controlled, professional, but he could feel her heart racing through the contact. Having fun yet? She whispered. Is everything a game to you? He whispered back. Not everything. Her tone made him glad he couldn't see her expression. But I find life's more interesting with a bit of play mixed in with the deadly serious parts. The observatory was a dome of transparent crystal, offering a panoramic view of normal space now that they'd dropped from FTL. Stars wheeled slowly past as the ship drifted, emergency systems casting red shadows across the curved walls. The perfect trap, Nilara commented, moving swiftly to a hidden control panel. One way in, nowhere to hide, and completely exposed to space. Unless you know what you're doing, James replied, securing the entrance. Which you clearly do. Her fingers danced across the crystal controls, bringing hidden systems online. The transparent dome shimmered, overlaying with tactical displays. The observatory was designed as a last resort command center. My ancestors were paranoid. With good reason, apparently. James watched exterior feeds showing armed groups moving through the ship. They're coordinating their movements. This isn't just a faction of your court, this is military precision. Because they are military. Nilara's voice held controlled fury. Watch. The tactical display zoomed in on one group. Their weapons and movements were indeed military, but something about them caught James's eye. Those aren't celestial firearms. The design is human, Nilara finished. But not standard issue. These are prototypes, developed for a joint military program that was supposedly scrapped. Understanding dawned. The trade treaty. It wasn't just about commerce, was it? It included provisions for shared military development. Her silver eyes met his. Some in both our governments felt such cooperation was too dangerous. That our species should remain separate. The way she said separate carried weight beyond military concerns. James focused on tactical considerations instead. How high does this go? High enough that I trust very few of my own people. And you? She stepped closer, her presence making the air feel charged. You, I trust because I've seen your heart. Through every test, every challenge, you've proven yourself not just loyal, but principled. I was doing my job. Were you? Her hand touched his arm. Was it duty that made you shield me with your body in the garden? Professional obligation that keeps your eyes on me even when you think I don't notice? The ship shuddered again. Proximity alerts flashed across the tactical display. 3 ships dropping out of FTL, James reported, grateful for the distraction. Celestial design, but running dark. The final players arrive. Nilara's expression hardened. They'll try to dock, claim they're here to rescue me from human treachery. The perfect excuse to sever ties with Earth and impose martial law. Not if we expose them first. James held up the crystal she'd given him. You said this provides access to all secure systems? Yes, but... Her eyes widened. The communication array. If we could broadcast evidence of their conspiracy across all channels, they'd have no way to contain it. James was already moving to another control panel. But we'll need proof. Nilara's smile turned predatory. Oh, I have proof. I've been gathering it since the first attempt on my life. I just needed. She paused, looking at him with an unreadable expression. Needed what? Someone I could trust completely. Someone who proved themselves not for power or advantage, but out of genuine. She didn't finish the sentence. The door to the observatory exploded inward. James moved instantly, pulling Nilara behind a support column as weapons fire filled the air. Through the smoke stepped a familiar figure, Vex, the attendant who had first shown James to the Queen's chambers. Your Majesty, Vex's melodious voice held cold amusement. You disappoint me. After all our careful planning, you choose to trust a human? The only one who's disappointed me is you, Vex. Nilara's voice remained regal despite their situation. How long have you been working against me? Since your father foolishly began this cooperation with humans. Vex's iridescent eyes flickered to where James crouched, weapon ready. They're beneath us. Primitive. Yet you would give them access to our technology, our worlds. His lip curled. Your heart? More armed figures entered the observatory, a mix of human and celestial rebels. They spread out, weapons trained on the column. You have no idea what humanity is capable of, Nilara said. Her hand found James's in the shadows. Their strength isn't in their technology or their weapons. No? Vex sounded amused. Then what is it? Nilara's fingers intertwined with James's, pressing the crystal key between their palms. Through the contact, he felt a subtle vibration, a pattern. A code. Their strength, she said, drawing Vex's attention while James decoded her message, is their ability to surprise you. James recognized the pattern, an override sequence. The same one used in the garden. The same one that had been used against them, but this time, they could use it to their advantage. He squeezed her hand once. Ready. Surrender, Your Majesty, Vex demanded. Don't force us to kill you both. Nilara's smile was pure starlight. Oh, my dear Vex. You should have paid more attention to those primitive humans. They have such fascinating sayings. Like this one. James input the final sequence. Never bring a gun to a starship fight. The observatory systems responded instantly to the override sequence. Not by shutting down, as Vex clearly expected, but by activating every dormant protocol Queen Nilara had carefully prepared. Crystalline barriers erupted from the floor, separating the rebels into smaller groups. The transparent dome polarized in sections, creating disorienting reflections that confused targeting systems. And most importantly, the ship's communication array activated, broadcasting on all frequencies. What have you done? Vex demanded as his forces scrambled for position. Given you exactly what you wanted, Nilara replied, her voice carrying through the observatory speakers and across the ship's channels. An audience. James moved with practiced precision, using the chaos to take down two rebels before they could adjust to the changing battlefield. The hybrid weapon in his hands proved devastatingly effective against both human and celestial technology. Your conspiracy is being exposed as we speak, Nilara continued, her regal voice reaching not just the observatory but every ship in range. Every coded transmission, every secret meeting, every transaction, all broadcast across the Empire. Vex fired, his shot dissipating against the crystalline barrier. You'll destroy everything. The peace between our peoples relies on separation, on maintaining our superiority. No, James countered, moving to another position. It relies on trust. On recognizing strength in our differences. He caught Nilara's eye through the chaos. On being willing to take risks for something greater. The ship shuddered as the rebel vessels attempted to dock. But they were met with resistance, loyalist ships dropping out of FTL, responding to the broadcast evidence of conspiracy. It's over, Vex, Nilara declared. Your fear of humanity, of change, has blinded you to the true strength of both our peoples. Then I'll give them exactly what they fear. Vex raised his weapon, not at Nilara or James, but at the observatory's environmental controls. A tragic accident. A human guard losing control, destroying an entire section of the ship. James was moving before Vex finished speaking. He tackled the traitor just as the weapon discharged, the shot going wide but still hitting a critical system. Alarms blared as the observatory's atmospheric integrity was compromised. James. Nilara's voice carried over the chaos of escaping air and emergency sirens. Get to the backup controls, he shouted back, struggling with Vex as other rebels were pinned down by security forces responding to the broadcast. Not without you. The observatory's temperature plummeted as emergency force fields struggled to contain the breach. James saw Vex reach for a second weapon and made a split-second decision. He kicked hard, sending them both sliding toward the damaged section. Your Majesty, he called, managing a smile despite the situation, it's been an honor serving as your guard. Don't you dare. She was moving toward them, her silver eyes fierce. That's an order, Lieutenant. Some orders, he grunted, wrestling with Vex, have to be disobeyed. The force field flickered. In that moment, James saw his chance. He rolled, using Vex's own momentum to propel the traitor through the failing field. But Vex's grip was strong, pulling James toward the breach with him. Then a hand caught his arm, warm and strong despite its delicate appearance. Nilara held him, her other hand locked onto a support beam, as Vex was pulled into space. "I did not spend 3 months testing and training you," she growled, pulling him to safety with surprising strength, "to lose you now." Emergency doors slammed shut, restoring atmospheric integrity. Around them, the sounds of fighting died as royal security forces secured the observatory. The rebel ships were being intercepted by loyalist vessels, the conspiracy unraveling in real time across all channels. James found himself lying on the floor, Nilara beside him, both breathing heavily. "You disobeyed a direct order," she said after a moment. "Yes, Your Majesty." "To protect me." "Yes, Your Majesty." She propped herself up on an elbow, looking down at him with an unreadable expression. "And now you're back to formality?" Despite everything, James felt himself smile. Professional habits die hard. "Then perhaps," she said, her free hand tracing the line of his jaw, "it's time for some new habits. After all, I can hardly have a royal consort who's so rigid about protocol." James blinked. "Royal consort?" Her smile was radiant. "Did you think all those tests were purely for security purposes? I needed someone who could be both guardian and partner. Someone who could bridge our worlds." Her expression turned serious. "Someone who could love both a woman and a queen." "That's quite a job description," James murmured, acutely aware of her closeness. "True." But then, her lips curved as she leaned closer, "You've always exceeded expectations." Above them, through the repaired observatory dome, stars wheeled past as human and celestial ships moved in formation, working together to secure the sector. It was, James thought as Nilara's lips met his, a pretty good metaphor for their future. Breaking the kiss, Nilara smiled against his lips. "Still thinking like a guard?" "Always," he admitted. "But I'm learning to multitask." Her laugh echoed through the observatory, carrying across the open channels to the ships above. And in that moment, as human and celestial crews heard their queen's joy, any remaining doubts about the future of their alliance faded like stardust in the cosmic wind. "Well then, my clever guardian," Nilara purred, her silver eyes sparkling with familiar mischief, "shall we discuss your new duties?" James pulled her close, protocol finally giving way to something far more powerful. "I think, Your Majesty, that some discussions require a more private venue." "Indeed." She rose gracefully, extending her hand. "And James?" "I believe we're well past the need for, Your Majesty." As he took her hand, James reflected that sometimes the most important diplomatic relations didn't happen in council chambers or treaty rooms. Sometimes they happened in gardens and observatories, in moments of crisis and quiet laughter, in the space between duty and desire where two people, and two peoples, could find something worth fighting for. And if anyone questioned the sight of a human royal consort and a celestial queen walking hand in hand through the starlit corridors of power, well, they'd learn what James had discovered through all those tests and trials, that the strongest bonds in the universe weren't forged by protocol or politics, but by hearts brave enough to reach across the stars and find each other.